Hello and welcome to the in-depth series of Drishti IAS. Today we are going to discuss apartheid. Very important, a systemic racial discrimination that we are going to talk about today is related to GS mains paper first, GS mains paper second, as well as GS mains paper third and fourth. So let us begin with these many topics that we are going to go through So let's begin with these many topics that we are going to go through step by step. First of all, of course, is the background, why we are talking about it. On March 17, 1992, a referendum on ending apartheid was held in South Africa. This referendum was restricted only to the white voters. See, the problem here is that if we want to end something, of course, we will have to be inclusive in nature, specifically for those who are the victims of such discrimination. So it was only restricted to white voters. There was an overwhelming support to end South Africa's highly discriminatory policies towards the non-white population. It includes not only the blacks but the browns, Asians, etc., etc. Now, out of the more than 28 lakh valid votes, almost 69% voted yes to end the apartheid. Only 1 out of 15 regions recorded a majority no vote. That was the Petersburg in the strongly conservative northern Transvaal, and even there it was by this much. Okay, moving ahead. Now let's talk about apartheid. What is apartheid? Apartheid was a racist social, economic and political system that was restricted to South Africa, that demanded the segregation of the nation's population into whites and non-whites. It meant apartness in the Afrikaans language. Okay, that means it was a discriminatory policy that not only manifested itself in the form of social area, but also economic, political and whatnot. We will talk about the core of it as well. Now, before 1948, racial segregation had long existed in the white minority government of South Africa, the superiority through skin and race. The South African polities were dominated by a determination to maintain that white supremacy should keep on existing because it was the white man's burden to civilize the beastly population of Africa. The practice extended in 1948 when the National Party led by Daniel F. Malan won the South African election and implemented the apartheid philosophy. And this government also aimed to silence the liberal opposition. So, what are the manifestations of apartheid? We can look at this to understand it better. No voting rights for non-whites because non-whites were not capable of doing so. Strict segregation, not only in the field of public areas but schools, hospitals, etc. Separate public institutions and public transportation. No white and non-white can travel in the same bus or train or whatever. Restriction on blacks owning or renting land or property. There was also a ban on the formation of association and protest. There was also a prohibition on mixed marriages because that would, of course, make the whites dirty according to them. Moving ahead, let's talk about India and apartheid. See, after gaining its independence from the British in 1947, India was very well versed with how discrimination works. So, India vowed to oppose racism as well as colonialism, not only in Asia but Africa as well. Now, Mahatma Gandhi helped attract the attention of the international community to this particular cause in South Africa, of this racism in South Africa. At the Asia-Africa Conference in the year 1955, India made sure that it raises the voice against racism. India stood against apartheid in many international organizations. In 1960, India, along with the other newly independent African nation, because they were going through a similar history, they requested the UN Security Council to consider imposing sanctions on racism, on those who were doing racism in South Africa. Now, as far back as the 1880s, the Imbumba ya Manyama, that is Unions of Black, was formed. See, very old. And that articulated an African identity, but transcended tribalism. Through African National Congress, this was the most vocal form of organization that was formed in 1912. It started a movement which was led by elite blacks to oppose the disenfranchisement post the creation of the union. Okay. In 1949, the ANC introduced its program of action that supported strike action, also protest and other forms of non-violent resistance. Nelson Mandela became popular during this time only. But in 1952, the Defiance campaign was started. It called the people to break apartheid laws on purpose and offered themselves for arrest. So it became more violent in nature. In the late 1950s, a group within the ANC, which included Mandela, called upon more violent approach that was easily suppressed by the whites. Now, by the 1980s, anti-apartheid forces, started gaining ground over non-violent approaches because violence never works. So leaders like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, they became very popular, not just among blacks but also white South Africans during this period because it was a non-violent, peaceful approach. De Klerk came into power in 1989. In 1990, in a speech in the parliament, he announced that the time to negotiate has arrived over apartheid. So he lifted ban on political parties which were anti-apartheid, such as ANC. He freed thousands of prisoners, including Mandela, and lifted the state of emergency that had been imposed amidst rising protests in the 1980s. On March 17, 1992, a referendum among the white South African population ushered into a new era, once and for all in South Africa. So, I hope you understood what was the resistance, how all it started, what is apartheid, and India and apartheid as well. For more information, keep on watching Drishti IAS.